Welcome to Boxing During Dinner here from Versailles in Miami, where we're here for the presentation of the WBO title for Guillermo Rigondeaux.
Yep.
And his interview will be on another edition of Boxing During Dinner to air at the same time.
Right.
But we want to talk about Canelo and Trout this past weekend. And don't be surprised if Rigondeaux just stands up and walks in front of the camera.
It could happen any second.
It could happen any second.
There is.
So Canelo and Trout fought this weekend, David. It happened almost to the T of what we predicted out here on Boxing During Dinner, except for the fact that I did score the fight for Canelo by 1 point. If you scored it for Trout by 1 point, which I think he did, I could see it that way too. It was that close a fight. But the judging was an atrocity as expected in Texas.
Unreal that people knew weeks in advance going into this that the fight was going to be, probably hopefully a close fight, that the scoring was not going to be good, and that Canelo was going to win this fight if Trout didn't knock him out. That's what happened. I got to give a lot of credit to Canelo because I probably scored the fight in favor of Austin Trout by 1 round simply because I favored him as the fighter and I wanted to see him win. But both guys, I don't think there's a loser in this fight. Austin Trout, because of the open scoring, said after the fight, yeah, I lost to the better guy. You could tell that he was dejected. But had he not known going into the championship rounds that he was already down 4 to 5 rounds on some scorecards, and turns out even more on another, then, I think this is very much a different ending for both guys. Canelo puts his foot on the gas because he's not assured of victory. Austin Trout, continues to box with confidence because he thinks there's, the fight's on the table. I thought this was a very even fight. I have no problem with Canelo being declared the winner, but I do have a problem with the scorecards that showed it the way that they did.
Yeah, the scorecard was horrible, and like we said, Trout needed several knockouts to win the fight. He needed to count to 40 for him to win this fight. It was sort of ridiculous, but the 7th round, which was a difference in the fight, Canelo drops Austin Trout. Well, at least a difference in the fight on my card, not on the judges' scorecard. But he drops Trout. He hurts him pretty bad early in the round. What do you think Canelo didn't step on the gas? Because it seemed like if he did, he might have had a knockout.
Yeah, I think so too. But you have to see that Canelo respected Austin Trout in this fight, and he had every reason to. Trout didn't throw combinations the way he did against Miguel Cotto, and I think that might have been a difference maker in this fight. But he still is absolutely respected. He's got a pretty pop fold jab when he threw a Canelo that he landed. That left straight left comes through in a number of different angles, and yes, Canelo didn't expect to get knocked out by Austin Trout, but you have to be respectful of a guy like Austin Trout with his type of capabilities because that guy got hurt and dug deep and maybe came back, had it not been for the knockdown, as a round that he probably could have won, and he was really hurt in that round. But I don't think there's any fault in Canelo's strategy by taking the foot off the gas and playing it safe. No,
not at all, and it turned out to his favor. And it's funny because if you see Canelo's other fights before this one, you look at the crowd and they respond to his hard shots, to his punching power. And this fight, they were responding to something else. If you look at the back, you look at Eric from Golden Boy, Eric Gomez, and Oscar De La Hoya, and a lot of guys, they were responding to his boxing because he was moving and he was avoiding a lot of shots from Austin Trout. Austin Trout landed more punches, but it wasn't the 20%. How impressed were you with Canelo's, defensive performance? Because it was something we haven't seen in his career to this point.
I think people have known that Canelo is this combination puncher. He's got surprising speed, really good power. But this, in the first or second round, I thought, that Austin Trout had kind of was going to set the tone with his jab, and that was going to kind of be the story. But Canelo, adjusted much to his credit, found ways to slip punches and create, maybe that's part of the reason that Austin Trout only threw jabs for a good period of time and couldn't put combinations together, is because Canelo Alvarez was fighting a brilliant defensive fight. He still has a long way to go, I think, to be declared truly elite, but 154 pounds, he might be the best guy there right now. And that's a big statement. For a 22-year-old, he might be as developed as any guy at that age in recent years.
So the fight isn't signed yet, but let's not beat around the bush. Canelo against Miguel Cotto in September. Who wins that fight?
I would love to say that Miguel Cotto is going to win that fight. I think it's still a really interesting fight. I think Cotto's jab is still a very good story for him when he chooses to use it. He is a good combination puncher, and he's got decent speed and power that you still have to know about. But Canelo Alvarez does a lot of those same things better now. You've got a 22-year-old versus a 32-year-old. I think this is Cotto's last big payday. I think it's a good fight. Stylistically, this to me is a more exciting fight than Trout versus Canelo may have been. But I just don't think it's a fight that Cotto's going to win at this stage in his career.
And I say let's not beat around the bush because the Mayweather fight, maybe it'll happen down the road, but Mayweather has a 6-fight deal with Showtime. You think that'll happen towards the latter part of that deal and not early on? And Miguel Cotto was at the fight, and it's Mexico-Puerto Rico for Mexican Independence Weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, you couldn't write a better script. But, David, some other fights to talk about this weekend really quick. Martin Murray against Sergio Martinez. Murray goes to uncharted waters to Argentina to fight Martinez. I can't see it any other way than Martinez winning this fight.
Martin Murray's not a bad guy as far as, fighting skills go, but he's a come-forward fighter who, is not a huge puncher, but a decent puncher. He's tailor-made for Martinez to cut him up, and I think Martinez is calling for an 8th-round knockout, and I wouldn't be surprised if he got it.
Amir Khan against Julio Garcia.
Julio Diaz.
Garcia. Julio Diaz, who's towards the latter part of his career. I mean, it's surprising that he's still fighting guys at this level, but he's traveling to England to fight Amir Khan, who says this is the last fight in Great Britain.
Right. It's it's one of those fights where it's another named guy that Khan has to look good at against. In this comeback trial. I think this is a fight that Amir Khan wins. But again, what I want to see from him in this type of fight is that his defense has improved. I've always thought that his offensive skills have been superior. His hand speed, his combination punching, his power, all superior. That defense is very suspect, and when you have a bad chin to go with it, you need to improve that.
Yeah, and the chin makes it exciting. Amir Khan should win by decision, I think, or maybe late round knockout, but the chin's always a question, and a big heavyweight fight that David's excited about, apparently.
Romain Stiverne and Chris Arreola, who couldn't like it? I honestly think this is more of a toss-up. A lot of guys don't know Romain Stiverne the way that we do. We've seen him down here locally. But I think this is going to be an Arreola fight, but this is going to be an interesting scrap for people who want to see heavyweights beating on each other. I'm going to go with Arreola, but this is exciting.
Yeah, I'll go with Arreola too, and it seems the winner will get Tyson Fury, who beat Steve Cunningham, sang a song. A lot of fans didn't like his performance, but at least it brought some fun to the heavyweight division.
Yeah, and in the second round, there was a real exciting moment when Steve Cunningham, coming up from cruiserweight, not known for his power, drops Fury hard in the second round. But Fury fought an ugly fight, but he fought the fight that a 6'9" guy would against someone he has a 6-inch and 45-pound height advantage over. So he fought the fight he needed to fight, but I'm not I think the jury's still out on him. And then Garcia Judah, which is apparently the crowning fight of this weekend. What do you think about that one?
I think Garcia wins. Judah's probably one of the best fighters who never made it where he should have. People say heart. I don't know if to attribute it to that or maybe stamina, but Zab Judah at this point of his career, I think his best days are behind him. I think Danny Garcia should win this fight. It should be a good fight for Danny Garcia to display his skills and win and show the world that he is one of the top at 140.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because these two guys are people who Danny Garcia has made the absolute most out of his skills, while Zab Judah has made the absolute least out of his. And I think Judah absolutely has the skill set to win this fight, but I don't think he's the fighter that has what it takes to win this fight. I expect Garcia to maybe look a little bit lost like he did in the early rounds against Amir Khan. Judah's still got speed, still a slick fighter by anybody's estimation, but he just doesn't have the mental makeup I think it's going to take to go full through a 12-round fight against Danny Garcia. I can see this ending in a late-round stoppage for Garcia.
And before we're done, you look back at Zab Judah, the promise that was there early on, the first round against Costa, the first 3 rounds against Miguel Cotto and against Floyd Mayweather Jr. If you judge a guy from like the first few rounds, Zab Judah may be one of the best we ever saw.
If the Olympic system were in place in professional boxing, Zab Judah might be better than the guy we were talking about earlier in Guillermo Rigondeaux. But he's got to fight 12 rounds, or he has to find a way to end the fight before that, and I don't think either of those are going to happen.
And wouldn't it be nice if we saw a surprise? At least it'll get some buzz in the boxing world in the 140-pound division. Yeah. But that's it for Boxing During Dinner. Watch our other videos because we have a good interview with Guillermo Rigondeaux and Joel Casamayor. So watch out for that. And we'll be back
Friday. Tell them about something happening this Friday.
Oh yeah, we're celebrating our 2nd-year anniversary at the Hoxton in Brickell. So if you're in Miami, go to the Hoxton in Brickell after 7 p.m. We'll be there hanging out.
Come by all night. We'll be by.
Come by. We'll be there. We'll be there till late. And next week, before I go to Vegas for the fight, we'll break down the Guerrero Mayweather fight. And also Abner Maris and Ponce de Leon, a great fight.
It's going to be awesome on the undercard too.